we will move along to a very probably brief discussion about the Minuteman Tech request for appropriation of E&D funds over to their capital stabilization fund, which the select board heard that subject last night and voted on that subject. And are there any comments?
Sure. So do I understand it to be movement of money from one reserve account to the other reserve account without any impact on our assessment?
Correct. No impact on assessment.
Then I wish they would have put that in just that phrasing, because I find it really hard to follow that letter.
On the initial letter that they sent on July 22nd, it did say, or June 22nd, it did say, with no impact, and also promising no further impact to assessments as a result.
Yeah, the no further impact is a good point. Occasionally, these funds need to be replenished. So while it's net neutral now, they may need to be restocked with an increase at some point. My question is really, and this is just me not knowing any better, but what exactly is our influence or authority over this as a finance committee?
I would say little to none, except what we can wield through our representative, Pam Morse. The only other way we could influence is by influencing or advising the select board on how they vote. One member of the select board last night did suggest perhaps voting against this, just as a tactic of, slowing down their process a little bit. The fact that their free cash was stated on June 7th, I believe. They sent us the letter on June 22nd and needed a reply by tomorrow. And it was just all a little bit too fast. But that's probably really our only recourse. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Borden?
Did the Board of Selectmen vote last night on it?
Yeah, they voted to approve it.
They should make the stipulation in the future that if something like that comes down, you have less than a week to respond. Then I think they would say, we're not going to put up with that. If you do, you're just going to get a negative vote from us, because that's not right. It's not right to the Board of Selectmen to say, the select board saying, hey, here's this thing you decided in a couple of days that you have to accept this or not. And they don't have time to do their due diligence. So I think it's kind of it's not a good precedent to be set by Minuteman to do something like that.
It's not the first time we've had this kind of thing happen with them some years ago, and this might have been subject to the old agreement before the other towns dropped out, but there was something that they wanted to do, and it was kind of phrased in a letter that if you want to have a special town meeting, you need to have it in the next 30 days, or else this goes into effect. And it was the same kind of thing, like, and I think it was like this time of year. So I do think they play a little fast and loose with just sending out essentially demands that people don't have time to react to.
Anybody else? Mr. Majors.
Well, they did allocate the money in their stabilization fund, so they're not really asking for more money. They have the money. The thing is, it's such a unique situation where they have just the growth of the student population is driving budgets crazy. That's, the students want to go there, and it's not a cheap place, because it is after all a vocational school, which because of the size of the district, transportation costs are extraordinarily high. And they also have to get, besides Acton's permission, all the other towns that are part of the district, and they have to coordinate. So that's why they try to move things along. like at the end of the fiscal year, when all the towns are having their town meetings, Dr. McQuillan had to go to 8 or 9 of them. And that's, it's asking a lot, but he or his representative attends all those meetings and answers all the questions. It's, unless we want to really put a cap on the population, there are opportunities for growth there. And I think it all boils down to our initial set of assumptions and the reluctance of the district to believe that they could even fill the original school with 625 students. It could be almost as much as 900 kids there next year, once they have the veterinary building and all that other stuff. I don't know how he squeezes them in, but.
I think, and this is, we've got time to think about it, but they always send us their budget book. I always find it lately harder to follow because for years we had 28 kids in the school. So, enrollment was never part of the issue. I guess I'd like to see more of a breakdown of, if you will, what's the breakout on the cost? What's the fixed cost? What's the new building cost? What's the incremental cost of the student? Because now we got 80 kids, so when I look at the 20 or 30% increase, I'd like to understand how much of it is just volume driven, that we got more kids in the school, and how much of it is attributable to other things. Maybe we can make a request, later in the year to say we'd like to see this type of analysis done, so we can better understand and better explain these increases, because they are by and large the biggest increases that we're looking at in terms of percent, not in terms of dollars, but definitely in terms of percent.
Peter Light was asking if we could have more out-of-district students go there, and it's just, there's no room. There's no available seats. And
That ship sailed a few
that
years
ship
ago.
sailed years ago.
Well, I'll throw in my 2 cents and take on the situation, which is that when their free cash was certified, it was $340,000 over the 5% DOR recommendation. So they either had to give that money back or transfer it. And I think if you divide that among the member towns, it probably worked out to approximately 1 year's tuition for one of our students. So it's not like it was a tremendous amount of money. I think that by using it for the capital projects that they're going to use it for, we can hope that we can get more students in the district without adding a lot of extra costs. Dr. McQuillan did respond and say that it wouldn't add additional variable costs. Personally, I don't really see how that's possible. When you add a building, you're going to add some variable costs. But it hopefully will be minimal. And then starting in 24, of course, 3 to 4 FTEs, which also were part of their ongoing strategic plan anyway. So it's one of those where we'll see how it pans out in the end. And at the moment, I think the only thing to really be upset about is the timing, right? I don't think the specific dollar amount or the request was out of line in any way. I think the timing was just difficult and short. Okay, shall we move along? All right, so next on our agenda is the point of view. And Christine Russell already started working on the point of view today and making some changes, and she did pass that along by email to all of us. I do not have a way to share that here on the computer, and I don't know if anybody else does. So we may not be able to go through what she worked on today. Well, I think we're a little late. We're a little late in the game, I think. So I think
Austin's here.
I think what we can move on to immediately, though, is deciding who's going to work on the point of view this year. And I would nominate anybody who's missing from the room right now. They're not here to defend themselves. No, but in all reality and actuality, are there any volunteers to work on the point of view this
I
year?
can help on the analysis, but I don't want to take on time
Okay, so Isha will help with analysis, but doesn't want to do the primary responsibility. Mr. Majors?
I can help Christine out, especially updating the charts that I created last year.
Okay. Should we assume for the moment that it's going to be you and Christine with help from Isha, and between the three of you, if Christine worked on it last year, which I believe she did, and she wants to bow out, we'll give her the opportunity to bow out? Does that sound reasonable? Pardon? Yeah, I mean, are you all right working on it 2 years in a row? I thought you did a great job last year.
Yeah, as long as I have some assistance. It's the research, really time-consuming, and I guess knowing what questions we're trying to solve here, or what issues we're trying to address in our point of view. And I think that was never ever really talked about by, at least at the committee level.
Yeah, and Steve and I were talking a little bit about this, Steve Noon and I, and we think it's going to be vitally important this year and next year that our point of view is, I think maybe a little bit more executive level, a little bit more succinct, and really addressing what's going to be forefront in people's minds, which is, you know, the economy, the impact on the taxpayer, and then if and when we might be headed for an override, all of these subjects that seem to be forefront in the conversation lately. So we may need to tailor it. I think it still needs to be a balanced, right, an objective document. I don't think it's our specific job to try to tailor the opinion of the public, but we certainly want to make sure that they have the right information to make a good opinion on their own. Mr. Noon, do you have some comments?
Yeah, I think it's a good time to discuss content. You know, we tend to add slides as they come up for different reasons. You know, this year's flavor, this whatever's going on. We seldom take them out. And it does get to be a fairly cumbersome document to present. So I'm in favor of shortening it. However, as we do approach the possibilities of an override, which may happen in the next few years, I think we have to maybe have a bigger educational piece, because the last operating override was 2006, you know, and so a lot of the residents of this town have never experienced that. And I think it's probably incumbent on us, whose role is to advise the town meeting members, the residents, to start more of an education process. I think we need to maybe talk more about specifics of the budget, less about economics. You can sum up the economics this year by saying inflation is not running at 2.5%, and therefore we have a problem. However, you know, people might want to know, in terms of the large groups of employees, teachers, police, firemen, you know, how does the compensation stack up against state averages? How does the staffing stack up against averages? Now, my research always says we're pretty average, meaning we're neither overstaffed nor understaffed, neither overpaid nor underpaid, you know. But that's information I think we have to start getting out there, because the question that will come up in whatever year the override occurs is, have we been good stewards of the taxpayers' money? And I think we have to start working information into the point of view that talks to that issue. We don't necessarily have to draw a conclusion, you know, but I think we have to start offering more information that would be educational and answer the questions that people are going to have before they ask them. It's a long process to get from deciding to go for the override to getting to the town election. and getting to town meeting. And you have to win both.
And Steve, if I can interject on the comment you made earlier about, educating the taxpayers, one of the things that you and I had talked about before, which I really would like to highlight and get in the notes so that we don't forget about this when we start redrafting the point of view, was that we both agreed there was a real importance to educate the taxpayer on the difference between the ongoing budget, operating budgets versus capital expenditures, and so that people really can get a grasp of what the difference between those two items is with regard to the longevity of payments, that sort of thing. So that's going to be an important part that we'll need to touch on in the point of view.
And I think while we've been relatively successful with our outreach program, for the most part, we talk to PTSOs and other groups in town, and if we're lucky, we draw 10 or 20 people. I do think we have to get back in the habit of presenting it at a school committee meeting, at a Board of Selectmen meeting. Not to put you on the spot, Dean, I know you just dropped in to say hello, but because it's our point of view, and the idea is that's who we're writing it for in the end. And we ought to be willing to stand up there, present it, and take questions.
I had a question. So I think if we're trying to educate our citizens, then it would be best not to read their minds, so to speak. I wonder if it might be a worthwhile exercise to solicit questions from the town folk on what they would like to hear from us. It's just an open question.
Or like a poll, find out what people's understanding of various topics might be, okay?
Yeah, there's probably nobody here remembers 2011 when I had open mic night at a FinCom meeting and invited townspeople to come in and give us ideas to save money. It was an interesting experience. No chair has ever chosen to do it again.
I'm curious, but I won't ask you to expound at the moment. Since Austin is here, do you know if there's a way for us to share wirelessly with the TVs in the room, or through such like devices rather than computers? Okay. Okay. So I'll just get a quick consensus of the FinCom, whether you would like to go through the slides that Christine updated here in the room today, or whether you would all like to do it individually later.
I know some of the slides are like 2 years ago. They don't include some of the new slides that I created.
Yeah, she did mention in the preamble that she wasn't able to update that particular document, and so she apologized for that.
But I think it's a good, at least the top, even though the data might not be up to date, at least the topic is there that we can talk about.
Roland?
I think we should wait till we have a bigger,
Okay.
till Christine's here, Christy, Jason, and
Yeah, I agree.
Is he going to be here?
Okay, I agree. Nobody else disagrees then, I assume. Mr. Wellinghoff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm just thinking, we could come up with a process now on how to make this more digestible. In past years, we've gone through so many iterations of the presentation, and I agree with Steve, I think we want to redirect the material, and a lot of it can be moved to an appendix. There's a lot of stuff that can be shortened and tightened up, and if we want to have the bulk of it be, comparable statistics on how like the town ranks relative to financial metrics, et cetera, that sounds good. And maybe we want to just think about a process on how to break that up into a chunk or two of the next meeting. Could the next meeting just be brainstorming of what sort of slides we want to see, rather than fine tuning and itemizing each slide is just, or do we want to do that offline via email? Just what's the best way to make this as productive as possible?
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I think one administrative comment is that if we had a home maybe on a town website where we could store this data and it would be accessible to all of us, we log in the data and log in the file, log it back out, so we know who's updating what chart at any one time. Because one of the problems I know, it drove me crazy last year, is copies of the files are all over the place, and they're all different, especially once they get updated. It just gets hard to keep track of them. And, where the data came from, and we've got to verify that. But if we had a home for each set of data, that would be good. That we could all maybe have a password to access it, but follow administrative procedures where we'd log in a file, log it back out, so we know who has that file at any one time, that they are updating and so on. But again, that's an administrative thing, but it's very important.
Well, we do have a place where we can catalog documents on the town website for the FinCom. I think that might be an appropriate place to keep it and then post the updates there.
I think he means like a collaboration app.
Almost like a Google Sheet type situation is more what he's thinking. So I guess I'll have to speak with the town to see if there's any problems with us doing that, or which format or how we could do that. I think the other option is you just pass it back and forth between whomever's working on it, and then post each iteration to the webpage where we post our documents. Isha?
I think what Mike is alluding to is that there were problems with version control in that process, all
Okay.
of last year and the previous year, if I remember correctly. So there was a lot of confusion because things were updated, but then what was presented didn't have the updates. And so I think if we had something like SharePoint or some other venue, that we could all have access to it, that also had the versions stored, that would greatly facilitate the process, I think.
So who should be our expert on this subject? Perhaps
Is there-
you. I assume you deal with a lot of these type of documents in your work.
I do.
Would you mind maybe shooting me an email with proposals of different
Certainly.
platforms that we could or should
Absolutely.
be considering, and then we can just ask the town what they approve?
Yep.
Or what they might already have.
Sounds
Sound good? Okay, I see
Yep.
nodding in the audience, which is important. That's good, thank you. Any other comments, questions on the point of view?
Yeah, I think one scary feature of this year's point of view is the piece of the budget that's beyond our control and is almost out of control, and that's what the federal government is doing with energy and everything else. It's getting scary, I think, and it seems like it almost seems like they're not doing anything, but on the other hand, it almost looks like that's their plan. To make fossil fuels very expensive for the consumer, and so they switch to alternative sources of energy, but yet you're starting to read the unintended consequences of that, where they have like it got cold in Texas, so they didn't have heat. Their heat pumps wouldn't work. The winds in the North Sea stopped blowing, so they couldn't use the wind farms and things of that. I guess the point is, if they, especially when it comes to the federal government's energy policy, the more sources of fuel, the more sources of energy, I think the better. And they're doing the opposite plan. They try to limit it to just a few. And then we find ourselves switching from being energy independent to going and talking to the Saudis and all the other third world countries that we don't want to do, didn't have to do, don't need to do, but we are doing.
Does anybody else feel like it's the 1970s headed straight for us all over again? Roland?
Well, it's also, and I think the town really needs to look into this as well. They want everybody to have electric vehicles. Well, the power grid can't sustain that. We don't have enough power. Can't generate enough power. As Mike just said, hey, you can't, the wind doesn't blow, the sun doesn't shine, those alternative forms don't work, right? Everybody doesn't have battery backup. I know somebody put in a system in Acton that costs like 75 grand with battery backup. With rebates, he gets it for like 50, but I can buy a heck of a lot of energy for $50,000, I'll tell you. I'll be dead by the time I spend that. But the push by the government to do that, could it go electric, but the grid can't sustain it. So what happens now, right? And, there are ways that you can make buildings and things more efficient, better windows, insulation, things like that, that can get you part of the way there for a lot less money than, not necessarily need to go and replace a heating system that's working fine and go replace it with a heat pump because it's going to save you money on energy. Well, what's the cost to put that heat pump in? So I think those are the things that the town has to really look at as we move forward with our capital needs and things like that. And it's also maintaining what we have so that we're not caught blindsided later on down the road because all of a sudden your heating system goes out because you didn't maintain it in the building. That type of thing. So I think there's still a lot of things that can be done.
I think it'll be a very, very interesting question over the next couple of years, whether we can answer quantifiably what benefits we may have received from some of the sort of net zero building that we've done recently, especially if it's advantageous. That would be very important to know.
I'd also like to see, how we got the ARPA funds and how they've been spent. And we need to address some of that from the point of view where we spent the money and what benefit did it bring to the town.
Okay.
You just don't have this big chunk of money and go spend on something and go, well, it really didn't do much. Then I just look at this as we just wasted resources that we were the recipient of. Should be good stewards of that money to do the best for the town itself, for the town residents.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, since we've now wandered into infrastructure, I'm concerned about electricity as well, but closer to home, we have problems in this town with water and sewer that are right here and right now. And it's a question of priorities as to where the money goes to fix what. I know there's study groups on sewer in Great Road. I know the Water District has needs far greater than the ARPA money that was allocated, and these things are going to hit Acton residents a lot quicker and a lot harder than electricity. But you're right, most of the focus is on electric cars.
So I think with that, where I'd like to leave the point of view is for each of you to review what Christine has done with the point of view today and sent out, and then just give your comments of what you think is important to see or important for us to include and review for the point of view, and send that to me. And then I can pass that along to Mike and Christine and Isha. All right, so there are no minutes to approve. Are there any liaison reports?
The Health Insurance Trust met, though I wasn't in attendance. I was elected chair.
Congratulations.
That was planned. It wasn't because I wasn't in attendance. The only other business that was conducted is we placed the stop loss insurance for the year, which was increased to $175,000 stop loss from $125,000 in the past. 50? Okay. And other than that, the Health Insurance Trust now takes the summer off and won't meet again until September.
So can you just explain for my edification how the stop loss works? Is this like a reinsurance type situation?
So the Health Insurance Trust is self-insured. However, each year we engage in a bidding process to get some reinsurance in place to protect us from catastrophic losses. The suggested premiums to maintain us where we were quite high. So we decided to up the stop loss. It sounds bad to say, it's almost like rolling dice or going to this casino. Some years we make money on reinsurance and some years we don't. We didn't make money.
Versus the premium, you mean?
Yeah. This past year, we did not make any money on the reinsurance. Prior year, we did. We have claims, individual claims that can go into the $1 million range. We do track how many people about each quarter have reached the halfway point in the limit to see where it's going to land. But it is attempting to predict the unpredictable, which is why we buy reinsurance, because we can't afford the catastrophic loss.
So if I've understood you correctly, you're saying that the stop loss is almost like a deductible in a way, perhaps? On any individual claim, we could expect to pay as much as $50,000, and now we've upped that to $175.
No, yeah, well, it was 150.
Oh, 150.
Now we're up to 175.
Okay.
There's more to it than that, but yes, we pay the first 175, they pay the rest.
Thank you. Any other questions for Steve on his report? Any other liaison reports?
Since I wasn't at the DPW study committee, and I know you were, can you give a update there, please, sir?
Yes, I will, and I put some of my notes on Steve's paper. So I was able to attend the recent DPW committee meeting that Roland was unable to attend. And unfortunately, I was late to it and had to leave just before they adjourned. But there was a presentation given at that time by the consulting agency that did the feasibility study. And the name is escaping me at the moment. Dean, what's the name of the? Weston and Sampson, thank you. And so in addition to giving a presentation of their study, I think they've also been asked to refine what their planned presentations are for the DPW, which will then be presented to the select board on July 25th. Dean and I talked about whether or not we should do a joint select board FinCom meeting for that presentation. We didn't think that this presentation would be the appropriate one to make a joint meeting, but at some point in the future, we should have a joint meeting. The July 25th presentation should really be about needs and possible ways to address those needs, and not so much about finances. Is that a fair statement, Dean? Okay. Have I left anything else important out from the meeting that you think that I should include? It's been over a week ago now, or almost a week ago now.
I think we did talk a bit about perhaps phasing in out of the project.
You're welcome to grab the mic if you want, or I'll repeat what you are telling us for the recording and the audience.
So, there was some discussion about phasing in the project. One element in particular is the situation with the fuel tanks, which serve not only town operations, but regional school operations. They have probably 100 vehicles on the school district that fuel up there as well, so it's a shared cost. And in their present location, those fuel tanks are basically dead center in the middle of the potential construction zone of building the new facility. So one of the things we kicked around is, should we pull that out of the project and move it ahead and get it done earlier rather than later. So kind of clear the field a little bit. We also talked about possibility of, after we've had some more discussion and seen the presentation to the select board, is it a time to look for funding next year to go to 60% design and further flesh out exactly what the project is? The other item that's a concern is that I think everyone concedes that the new facility cannot be built on the same site while the existing building is in operation. So temporarily have to relocate most of that operation for a period of 2 years. So that's another consideration I'm going to have to come up with. I was thinking today it'd be a great use of the Kmart site. It's big enough, centrally located. But, you know, so those are a couple of the other items we kind of kicked around a little bit. And a lot of it is going to hinge, frankly, on the result of the select board's goal setting, which is happening this week.
Tomorrow, right? Is it
Yeah, Thursday.
Thursday.
So if it ends up with the 4 members of the select board say that this is not an important project, and I say it does, why, in 5 years, we'll talk about this again.
Well, Dean, thank you for
Yep.
helping me with the update. I think the point that he brought up about phasing, which I had forgotten to mention, I think sounds like is a critical importance for the project, specifically because the fuel station is at its life of use as well. And then there's a problem with the perimeter and safety and gating and keeping people out of the facility, which currently we don't really have a means to do. So those were, I think, the 2 items that really are shining out as priorities, which might need to be undertaken as their own projects, which then, of course, gets the facility ready for other things. Thank you very much, Dean. Let me pull up my agenda. So for those of you who can attend, sorry, and I'll take some if you guys want to talk about it as well, but for those of you who can attend, I think it would be well worth your while to attend the July 25th select board meeting if you can. Watch it on Zoom or what have you, so that you can at least see that Weston and Sampson presentation. And as I've said in many meetings in the past, it's also important that we all, as FinCom members, if we haven't already, go down and make a site visit at the DPW, which we'll be working on that as well, because it's one thing to see it in pictures, it's something else to see it in person and to look a little bit about the operations and how they work and interact with the building. Go ahead, David.
You know, is the stage, is this post-feasibility study and sort of pre-design, is that where this is, sort of a timeline?
Yes. We're at a phase where the committee that's been appointed to review this unanimously agreed that the building that they're currently in cannot be suffered any longer. And I've been there and I've seen it, and I would agree with that assessment. Given the size of the operation and the number of employees and the type of work they're doing and the environment that they're currently doing in, it's fairly untenable. And so the idea now with the Weston and Sampson giving the presentation to the select board is to try to figure out the scope, right? How big do we want to go? I mean, it's going to be expensive no matter what they do. And if you're going to spend the money, you want to spend it wisely. And you want to time it correctly with everything else we've got going on, and try to get it to a design phase that's going to work and minimize, as he said, how long do we have to displace the operations. It's not going to be simple by any stretch of the imagination. Go ahead, Roland.
So I was at the tour with everybody, and when they put the equipment in at night, all the big trucks and stuff, it's like they got to play Tetris. It is extremely tight. There's no room for error. There's no room in order to get, if there's a piece of equipment they need, it's in the middle, they got to take everything out to get to that one vehicle. So it wasn't designed at the time for the size of the operation that they have to be able to maintain all that they do within the town. And they do a good job of keeping some of these vehicles going. And they have one that I saw sand my street this summer and this winter. And it was, I was in high school when, or I just graduated high school when they purchased the thing. That was in the 80s. So it's a testament to the town staff to keep that machine still going. Nowadays, they're more of a dual use where they just put a sanding box into a dump. So they get dual use out of the equipment, so it's better utilization of your equipment. So I think those are the things that, you know, they just don't, they're storing some of the equipment outside that really could last a lot longer if it's stored in the proper facility that it should be in. So we look at things like that, and you look at the people that work in the buildings, and the buildings are not, they're not in that great a shape. They're really not. And it's like we just, you know, we replaced a school, we replaced 2 schools. And you really got to take care of the rest of your operation too, because when you look at it, that impacts the whole town. It impacts public safety, getting your streets cleaned in time on snowstorms and things like that, and maintain the equipment so that they can do their job. So it needs to be, something needs to be done. The sooner the better.
David, did you finish your comments before I cut you off?
I don't know. Go ahead.
I can give you a minute.
No, go ahead. Well, I guess what I was thinking is, this is a bit of my thought on this is, you know, I toured the facility as well, and it does seem like there's, you know, a bit of work that's needed in at least a few spots. And the existing structure is clearly old, and the layout could be improved, and the town has grown. Just my thought on it was more, you know, I've been going through the report, and this is the one dated May of 21, so it might be a little bit dated. But I was wondering, just at a sort of a 10,000-foot view, are there other alternatives rather than the whole sort of enchiladas, or other ways of, is the committee looking at other ways to, you know, and I know it sounds great on paper, just up front to do everything, because it's maybe been underinvested in for a while, and maybe the equipment has had its life extended, but are there ways of maybe phasing too short term of a term, but of staging it, of, you know, we know in years 1 through 5, we're going to tackle it this way, and this is what's going to get us to that. And just alternatives along the lines of, rather than the whole enchilada.
So excellent question. And in addition to the phasing that Dean mentioned with regard to fuel and perimeter safety being first on the priority list, the committee has basically crossed out everything to do with the entire site plan that's in that initial report, and all they're focusing on now is the building and work environment for the people, the trucks, the mechanics, washing stations. None of the other site is deemed to be of necessity to be discussed anymore. It's really just about the DPW building itself. And the unfortunate thing about the building that they're currently in, I think, is the fact that it was built as a cinder block structure, right? It just can't easily be raised, modified, added on to, what have you. Whereas if it had been probably a large open steel structure, it'd maybe have some more options. It seems fairly unfortunate that it's literally just Legos with a roof on top from a structural perspective. Yeah, but I hope that answers that question at least, that the scope that's in there, it addresses a number of different scopes, but the scope that the committee is currently focusing on after the initial 2 priorities is the building. And that's probably more or less where the scope will conclude.
But is the cost of that, I mean, it's still captured in this, and the other items, it sounds like you're not including other smaller dollar items, right?
Yeah, they're not insignificant, but yeah, they're
Sure.
smaller. Cost, I don't know that we'll know with the way things are going at the moment. I don't think we'll probably be able to put it sounds like we won't be able to put an accurate cost or get an accurate cost on it until we actually take the thing past design phase and start asking for bids. I mean, it's a who knows, right? Any other comments, questions? Anything else, David? Okay, so I have on the agenda to ask if anybody can take my place as the planning board liaison for July and August, because I have nothing but conflicts on all the nights that they have meetings. And if you'd like to know, I can tell you when their meetings are. They meet on Tuesdays, and in July and August, I have them down for planning board on July 19th at 7:30. I can't be 100% sure the time is correct because I might have put this in a while ago. If anybody could attend that. I don't know if they're still doing that on Zoom. They might be, in which case it might be very easy to attend. The most recent one I was able to attend, I did on Zoom. It was nice. And then August, let me tell you, planning board on the 16th of August. And let me see if there's any others. That's it. So it's really just 2 meetings if anybody would be able to attend those. And really, I suppose July is more important than the August. The August 16th, I might be wrapped up by then. So it's really July 19th if anybody's interested or able to attend. Are you okay with the July 19th, Roland? Okay. All right, so thank you, Roland.
You don't need August 16th covered?
If you want to say that you'll do it, I'll accept that. And then if we both attend or if we make other arrangements, I think that's less critical. I probably hadn't looked at the date when I popped this in the agenda and was thinking that it was earlier in August. So you'll be down for August 16th at the
I'll
moment?
double check, and I think that would work. And
Okay.
we don't need a double team it. If
Great.
you have something else, I'll just go.
Thank you very much, David.
But I'll confirm.
Okay, thank you.
No, just August.
August 16th, July 13th. Okay, confirmation of future meeting dates. I did not do a good job of this last time we met, so let's not get it wrong this time. So let me make sure I'm in the right place. And what was the note that I asked you to put down?
July 26th.
Ah, okay. So first things first, we're currently on the 28th. Our next meeting should be on the 12th. Anybody have conflicts on the 12th of July at the moment? I'll take that. You can. The rest of us, you know, we're very busy with this.
There was a time when we went to 1 meeting for July and August instead of 2, but that's up to the chair.
And then for July 26th, I wanted to know if we could have a late start, possibly 8:15 start. Anybody opposed? Steve Barrett's scratching his chin because he's like, my day is long enough as it is.
It's July. He just works 24 hours a day.
If we can pare down our agenda items for that meeting, that would be helpful.
Yes, that would be helpful. So, all right, so let's say that for July 26th, we're going to go for an 8:15 start, and I promise we will pare down the agenda items, and maybe, just maybe, if we do a good job on our earlier meeting in July, maybe we can forego a July 26th meeting. Although this July 26th meeting will be the day after the Weston and Sampson report, so maybe it'll just be a meeting about that. So let me change this. Okay, edit, change to 8:15. And I have to make myself a note. And
Since Mr. Barrett came and sat through this meeting, I was wondering if we could ask him a question.
you may.
2 days to go in a fiscal year. What's the turn back?
So, good evening, everybody. Yes, 2 days to go the fiscal year. I believe, as was reported to the committee a couple weeks ago, the general fund turn back is generally trending lower in the 1% to 2% of total spending range. So it's coming down quite a bit from the $1.3 million range the last 2 years. Combination of hiring freeze and spending freeze being lifted, as well as, in my mind, inflation taking hold a little bit.
When do you think we'll actually get certified numbers? When do you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So legally, the town can pay prior year bills through July 15th. Then we take some time to pull the records together, and usually by mid to late August, we have all the data at the latest by Labor Day into the Department of Revenue for free cash certification. We like to get that done early in the process for ALG. So the normal kind of process for us would be to get free cash certified or the data in by Labor Day, and usually between Labor Day and Columbus Day, the certification comes out from the state.
Do they ever really change your numbers, Steve?
Well, I wouldn't say they change our numbers. It's a calculation, as you know, free cash, and it's by fund. You know, to your point, we've been trying to keep an eye on different grants and deficits because the state will hit the town for those. So, you know, we're trying to, keep an eye on any grant deficits and things like that. But, you know, I'm not really seeing any surprises at this point in time with a couple of days left in the fiscal year.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. And on that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Hang on, somebody needs to make it.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? Good night.